Hello Year 7, welcome back to the wonder that is beliefs and values. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it super? Yeah, I think it's very super. Oh, thanks Superman. Super person, maybe, I don't know, I'm not quite sure if you're a male or a female. Oh, that doesn't matter to me. All that matters is being super. Fair enough. Um, so, we're talking about Judaism today, and we're going to talk about basic Jewish beliefs and basic Jewish values. Now, the longer that I go on with this module, the more I feel I have to press home the fact that it's impossible for me to get everything about a thought system, a belief system that is 3,000 years old into half an hour. It's just never going to happen. But I'll give you, some basics. But like, people study this their whole lives, and there's always more to learn. There's always more to learn about this stuff because it's about being human. There's always more to learn about being human. Always new angles to see stuff with. So the first thing I need to tell you about Judaism is so Jews follow Judaism, right? It's the Jewish religion. And we're going to figure out who Jews think they are and who Jews think God is. And then we're going to look at some basic Jewish values. And how they present themselves in Jewish practices. And to do that, we need to go way back. Way back. Yes, way back. Even Superman says way back. Superperson, sorry. To the very beginning, right? The very beginning. And in the beginning, the earth was formless and void. So God said, let there be light. Eventually, one thing leads to another, and there came to be a man called Abram. I'll explain why God is spelt with a dash instead of an O later. Now, our topic is on Ishmael and Isaac, but to fully understand the story, we need to go over the story of their father, Abram, soon to be Abraham, but we'll get to that, right? So, one day, God came to Abram and told him to leave his home and move out to Canaan. Now, Abram had his doubts, but his faith was stronger than his worry, so he did 700 miles, right? Without a plane, he took his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot, a couple of other people, like his slave girl Haggai, to set on his new life. Now, slavery was normal back then. It's 3,000 years ago, right? Which is really an amazing thing to do. Like, sometimes Abraham's called father of the faithful because he said yes. He had this vision, this dream that God told him to do this thing, to leave everything he'd ever known, and he was like, yeah, all right. So I don't know, man. There's really a great deal of faith, and trust he has in himself. And after settling down and establishing a home, God came to Abraham again and told him that he would be the father of a great nation. Abraham laughed, for him and his wife were really old. I think she was 70 and he was 90. I would need to check that, but it's that sort of age. Abraham, being only human, accepted this news and waited for his son to be born. And God then changed his name to Abraham, which means father of many. And he promised Abraham, he said, look up and count the stars if you can, so shall your offspring be. Now I'm going to tell you this story through the medium of Lego, acknowledging that it is Lego, obviously. This isn't a real picture of Abraham. In Judaism, like in Islam, you're not supposed to make any images of living things. So if you go to a synagogue, which is a Jewish place of worship, there won't be any pictures of God or of people like there is in church, in some churches, like Catholic churches. So worth acknowledging that. God promises his offspring will be as numerous as the stars, and God says, I am who he connects with the history. I am Yahweh who brought you out of Ur to the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. So God gives Abraham this land, right? He gives them the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Which, so Jews believe God gave them the Holy Land, which is a little bit problematic. if you look at sort of modern conflict, especially in sort of Israel and Palestine. Yeah, but that's what Jews believe God did, right? He gave them the Holy Land, and his wife Sarah. Now his wife Sarah is quite old, that's why she's got grey hair, and that woman there, not wearing many clothes, is Haggai. Now Haggai is the slave girl, and you can see the wife there saying, "Fetch me some water, would you, dear?" And God said, "You will be the father of many." But Sarah's too old, right? Look, Yahweh has prevented me from bearing children, so have sex with my slave girl. Maybe I can build a family through her. What? It's a crazy story. Oh, it's crazy, man. Yeah, it is pretty crazy, isn't it? I think even Freud thinks it's crazy. Oh, it's very crazy. I don't know. What is going on? Well, it's just an ancient practice of... It's basically like we've got surrogacy today, which is where a woman can carry another woman's fetus, a baby in her womb until it's ready, if that woman is having trouble giving birth. But in those days, the slave was considered Abraham's property, and his wife says, sleep with her, get her pregnant, and then we can build a family through the slave girl. So Abraham says, okay, if that's what you want, and that's what he does. And then Haggai says, fetch me some water, would you, dear? Because those sort of the roles have reversed a bit, haven't they? Where now Haggai is asking Sarah to wait on her. Now, how does Sarah feel about this? You can tell by her face, she's not happy about it, is she? No, not happy at all. And she says, this wrong done to me is your fault. I gave you my slave girl, and now she regards me with contempt. May Yahweh judge between you and me. And she says, and Abraham's like, mate, it's your slave girl. It's under your command. Do with her as you see fit, like if you're angry. So what does Sarah do? She kicks her out. And I like this here. Look at her pregnant belly. It's a rectangle. That's harsh though, right? To cast someone out when they're pregnant, because I guess she's jealous. I will greatly multiply your descendants, such as they cannot be counted. You shall bear a son and call him Ishmael. He will be a wild donkey of a man and live in hostility to all his brothers. So, as you can probably tell from this picture, Haggai goes to the desert and an angel visits her and says, wait, go back and humble yourself to your owner. You are to have a son, and you will be part of this nation of many, and your son will be called Ishmael. So she goes back and she has a baby. There's the baby. And his name's Ishmael. Right? But wait! Oh, we haven't finished yet. 3 visitors turn up at Abraham's door, right? And the new family, with Ishmael were fine for a few years. But then Sarah became even more jealous of Hagar, picked on her and Ishmael for a number of years. And Abraham and his family were then visited by these 3 strangers, and one of them was secretly God. And God told Abraham that this time next year he'll return and Sarah will have a son. Sarah heard this and laughed. She was like, mate, I'm way too old. But by a miracle, Sarah did become pregnant and she ended up having a son. Thus Isaac was born, and the name Isaac means he laughs. So there's like a joy in the name, and also it's a bit humbling, isn't it? It's a bit like, okay, you laugh at God, but God can do whatever he likes. So now, so suddenly Isaac arrives, and Ishmael's already there, right? But Ishmael has been like the only child, and then Isaac arrives, and who is the son of Sarah. So it puts Ishmael in an awkward situation. Ishmael has lived until then thinking he was the promised son, but then maybe Isaac's the promised son, and then Isaac and he don't get on. Isaac mocks him, and so Ishmael mocks Isaac, and Sarah banishes Ishmael and his mother Hagar into the desert, and they ended up in a place called Beersheba. And Isaac became an archer, married an Egyptian wife, and have 12 sons. He has 2 sons. One of whom is Jacob, who has 12 sons, and one of them is Joseph, like Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, right? So Isaac is a founder of the Jewish religion, and Ishmael is a founder of the Muslim religion. So I hope that you're beginning to get this this sense of Judaism being part of Christianity and Islam, which is why they're all called Abrahamic faiths, because Abraham started them all. So just pause this video for a second, and just one of the things I'd like you to include in your chapter, please, is a story of Abraham. Now, you don't need to tell it in that much detail, as I told you, but one of the things that we do want to get in there is that God's promise to Abraham to make him the father of many nations, which he did, right? And there's a special name for that promise, which is a covenant. Covenant means a promise between God and man. It's like a serious promise, right? Okay, good. So we've looked at the story of Abraham in detail. I'll add a couple more things about his childhood, and also want to talk to you a little bit about some of the signs and symbols. What is the Holy Book in Judaism, for instance, and where do they worship, and some of their practices. So what we've got here is Abraham, an artist's impression of Abraham, and also important to remember that when Abraham was young, like Muhammad, peace be upon him, people worshipped idols. They worshipped stone statues of gods. And excuse me, Abraham didn't like this, and his father made the idols. That was his father's job. He made the idols for the religious places like the Kaaba. And one day his father went out, and when he came back, all of the statues were smashed, apart from the biggest one, which had a baton in its hand. And Abraham, who was then called Abram, while his dad had gone out, had smashed everything, had smashed all of the idols, because he was like, these aren't really gods, they're just bits of stone. And he was constantly having this debate with his dad. They're not really gods, Dad, they're just bits of stone. His dad was like, no, they're gods, you've got to take them seriously. They're alive, you know. And so his dad went out. So Abraham smashes up all these statues and puts the baton in the largest statue's hands. And his dad comes back and is fuming, absolutely furious. And he says, Abraham, what have you done? Abraham, you've ruined my profession. And Abraham says, well, it wasn't me, it was the God. And his father says, of course it wasn't the God, what are you talking about? It's just stone. And Abraham goes, you see, it's not a real God, it's just stone. I'm sure he got in a lot of trouble. But that's how the story goes. And it's an important story because it shows us that even from a young age, Abraham was interested in the one true God. He wasn't interested in a show of spirituality or in statues or in the way that people can use religion to make money. Even at great personal cost, he wanted to expose the truth about there being one God. And indeed, so the idea is that, as I said, God, this is a lineage which shows God creating Adam and Eve in the Garden of Creation. Then there's Noah's Ark a bit later, Babel, Tower of Babel, and then there's Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Esau, and Jacob, Jacob gives birth to the 12 tribes of Israel, one of whom is Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. So you kind of get a sense of the time scale there, how long ago this was. And this was all written down a bit later by Moses, a bit after Joseph, so sort of 1600 years ago. So those first 5 books of the Bible, which are the Torah, the Jewish holy book, which I'll show you a picture of in a minute, notes this story. So why is it God? So why is it G-D? Good to write this down, that Jews believe that God, or Adonai in Hebrew, is the same God in Christianity and Islam. And God is eternal, so no beginning or end. There's no start to God or end. It's impossible to get your head around. Benevolent, which means just totally loving. God is really a loving being in Judaism. Omniscient, God knows everything. He knows what you had for breakfast. He knows your subconscious. He knows what you're thinking about right now. Isn't what I am thinking? Yeah, Freud. Even what you're thinking. It's a bit scary. Yeah, maybe. Just think about good things. And omnipotent, all-powerful. God is supposed to be all-powerful, right? And because God is all of those things, it's difficult to get our head around. Jews do not write it down. So we'll leave a gap to acknowledge this is too big for my mind to get around. So I won't trap God, if you like, in a word. I will use the word as a symbol to represent something greater than human beings can understand. So I think it's quite cool. And this moment is the moment where God renews his promise. It is that covenant, that promise that God made to Abraham. A covenant is a special promise between God and man. So where Jews worship is in the synagogue, right? And the meaning of synagogue is to bring together. So they worship in the synagogue. You can see there the Star of David, that's their sign, the six-pointed star, which before King David took it as his sign. It was called the Seal of Solomon, and then it became the Star of David. So Jews have had that symbol in their heritage for thousands of years. This is a picture of a synagogue as well. Quite plain buildings often. They won't have statues of people or saints, because like in Islam, they won't have images of living beings because of the history of worshipping graven images. So if you go into a Catholic church, for instance, and there's Jesus on a cross and there are lots of saints, you just wouldn't find that in a synagogue or in a mosque, because they would say, well, that's a graven image. Some people might be tempted to worship that, to pray to the stone. And this is a picture of the Torah. So it's the Holy Scripture in Judaism, which was supposedly written by Moses, or Musa in Islam. Moses. You know the guy, seen The Prince of Egypt? Good Disney film if you fancy watching a film for some B&V homework. The Prince of Egypt, story of Moses splitting the Red Sea and leading the slaves to freedom, right? Burning bush and all that stuff. No, check it out. It's a cool story. As always, you don't have to believe it. And this is Hebrew. This is the language of the Torah, and it's written from right to left, like Arabic is, towards the heart. In a very ancient language, just as is Arabic. Good. Now we're doing really well. We've looked at the synagogue. We've looked at the Torah briefly. We've looked at Abraham and sort of where Jews think they fit into the universe, like God's chosen people. And it's also important to talk about their weekly practices a little bit. And we're trying to answer those questions. What are Jewish beliefs? What are Jewish values? And some Jewish practices. Right? And then if you want to, as an extension, you can compare Judaism with Islam and Christianity. Because now this is our third religion, isn't it? So, if you remember the story of Adam and Eve, God supposedly created the universe in 7 days. 6 really. The first day, you can see from this picture, he created light and dark. On the second day, God created the sea and the sky. On the third day, the land and plants. On the fourth day, the sun and the moon and the stars. On the fifth day, sun and the moon and the stars in one day. It's good effort, isn't it? On the fifth day, we've got birds of the air and fish of the sea. And the sixth day, we've got animals, all other animals, and human beings. Right? And on the seventh day, God rested. He hung out because he just created the universe. So it's sort of like fair dues if he wants a bit of a rest, you know. And there's a picture of God resting. And what Jews do to remember this is on the first day of each week, on the last day of each week, which is for them Friday from 6 p.m. until Saturday at 6 p.m. They rest. They have a day of rest. It's called the Shabbos, or the Shabbat, or Sabbath. Christians sometimes call it the Sabbath, which is on a Sunday. So Muslims have their holy day on a Friday. Jews have their holy day on a Saturday. Christians have their holy day on a Sunday. It's nice that they've shared out the days, isn't it? So they're not all on the same day. I wonder how that came about, actually, but I don't have that knowledge on me right now. So Jews, just before the Sabbath, on the Friday, usually in an Orthodox house, the women will do all the cooking for the next day and get all the food ready. So the next day, you don't have to do anything except go to synagogue and do your prayers, see your friends and your family and hang out. No homework, none of that. Although you're not supposed to play computer games, because technically you're not supposed to light a fire. And what they do is they sit down together and they have a symbolic meal, a Shabbos meal, which includes Shabbat candles, the washing of hands, challah bread, a Havdalah candle, and Havdalah spices. And I'll just show you a little image of sort of what this looks like, because every week, and we've got these symbols where they'll break bread together, they'll have wine, they will read from the Torah, and they will light candles of blessings. So that's something that happens every week for Jewish people, or people who practice their Judaism. I just wanted to talk to you about a few more things that you might see and be curious about, to help you understand the Jewish religion. A bit like you might see with Muslim women who wear the headdress, or Muslim men wearing traditional dress, and sometimes that can feel a bit weird if you don't understand it. Similarly, Orthodox Jews may have some practices or appearances that seem strange to you, and if you don't understand them, it can feel a bit alienating, if you know what I mean. Alienating makes you feel like an alien, makes you feel you don't belong, and uncomfortable, and some of that lack of understanding can lead eventually to racism, which obviously we want to avoid. So let's try and understand. This is something called the mezuzah, which is one of my favourite words to say in the whole world, a mezuzah. And a mezuzah is a tiny scroll with the most important Jewish prayer inside it, which is called the Shema, or Shema. I'm sorry if I've pronounced that wrong. And what Jews will do is they will screw it to the doorpost, to the front door of their house and the back door, and they will touch it whenever they go in. And it's like an heirloom. It's handed down from one generation to the next, and it's sort of a way of guarding the house and keeping the house safe. Jews will also have something called a talit. A talit gadol is one that it's like a prayer shawl that Jews will wrap around themselves. And you might see that there are these pieces of string with knots in here. And the knots in the string add up to 613, and there are 613 Jewish laws. So this is a symbolic prayer garment which shows they're wrapping themselves in the rules of the laws of God and then praying. So you might see Jews wearing a talit gadol, but you're more likely to see them wearing a talit katan. You might see Jews with these strings. Orthodox Jews, they have sort of these strings with knots coming down underneath. And what Jews will do is they'll wear this piece of clothing underneath their other clothing, a bit like a vest, but it's like showing that they're following the laws. It's a reminder to them to follow the laws of God as they go about their daily business. And most of those laws, very, very common sense, good things, to remember to treat yourself and others well. There's also the tefillin, which you might not see, you probably won't see unless you go to synagogue, but you might do if you ever go travelling to Israel, which are these two prayer boxes. One goes on the forehead and one on the left bicep, which is the shield arm traditionally. You've got to remember that in ancient world they were warriors, and they put the scriptures of God in their mind and in their strength. And it's to remind Jews, it's called the tefillin, to fill in their mind and heart and strength with God. That's how I remember it. And they wrap it round their arm. It's a very symbolic act. And all of these things have a meaning. I don't want to go into all of them because it's already, I imagine, a little bit overwhelming. And here's a kippah, which is a skull cap which goes on the head. So those are the symbols that you might see of Jewish people. And I hope that after hearing all of that, you have some sense of what Jews believe, what Jewish values are, what Jewish practices are. Enough for you to do your chapter. I'm aware that this week the lesson is a bit less structured. I haven't given you like a checklist of what to include in your booklet, because I hope after the first two lessons, which if you haven't seen yet you should go back and watch, because that will explain the booklet thing, especially the first one. I'm hoping that you are giving yourself a little bit more freedom to be creative about what you include. Now this is the Shema you're looking at here, which is that most holy of Jewish prayers. So you can have a read of that. If you have any questions, as always, please do send me an email. And here's me wishing you well in mind and body and soul. And I hope you enjoyed learning about the Abrahamic faiths, because now we've done Christianity, Islam and Judaism, and hopefully you understand how those three are linked a little bit more. Okay, bye. 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 It's very nice to talk to you. I'm glad Freud liked talking to you as well. Bye.